Did you know that I consider PowerApps have 5 different types of variables? So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about those, right? We're going to talk about global variables, context variables, with collections, and even name formulas, and help you not understand what they are, right? So that'll be the first part. The second part is we're going to try and get into why you might use them, right? I get those questions a lot from people like, hey, when should I use a global variable versus a name formula? Like they're the same thing. They're not. They have completely different behaviors. So what we're going to do today is go over that. Sound fun? And let's just switch over to my desktop and take a look. The first thing I'm going to do real quick is just make sure you understand what a variable is, because sometimes you guys come to this, you don't know what that is, right? So a variable is the same as something temporary, right? So when you put something into a variable, it's like writing something on your hand. Yes, I get it. I can capture information very quickly, right? Like, so when the cute girl in math class gave me her phone number finally, as fast as I could, I wrote it on my hand, but it was very temporary, right? So variables, very temporary, very fast, but variables are not permanent, right? Like you don't see her name on my hand, do you? No, because my hand, when it got washed, it went away, right? Or if I fell asleep, drooled on it, like it all went away. So when you think about storing things in variable, it is temporary. It's only going to exist while the app is running. So if you have something saved in a variable and your user closes the Power App, closes their browser, reboots their PC, any of that, it's gone. So anytime we have things in a variable, if we need to keep those permanently, then we want to store those into a data source like SharePoint or Dataverse. So, back in the day, for me, it was a Rolodex, right? I'm not old. But you get the idea. You have to make sure that you understand that variables are temporary, but they have a lot of function in that they give us a place to quickly grab information, store stuff temporarily, whether it's to make our app function, to do a pop-up message, to keep track, to keep counting things. Like we just like to use variables as quick little ways to capture a little piece of information, okay? That's the first thing. Now, the first type of variable we want to learn about is what we call a global variable. So this is a variable that can be available anywhere throughout your Power Apps. This is kind of the default variable. If you're not sure which of these 5 you're going to use, you're always safe using one of these because they can do anything and everything. And typically what you're going to do is you're going to create a variable using something like a button. So when they press a button. So let's insert ourselves a button. And for our button here, what we're going to do is we're going to write this in the form of set variable name, right? And so you can make your variable names anything you want, and they don't have to be predetermined. You don't have to stick to nomenclature. Like I always put var in front of mine just to help out Shane. But if you want to make yours say something like GLB, I see some people use global. Some people put like variable, the whole word written out. Some people don't put anything. Some people put underscores. It doesn't matter. Whatever name makes sense for you, put it here. So like in my case here, I'm going to literally call this var buddy, like just so you can see that it can be as absurd as you want. Like one of my variables in one of my customers' apps is var, this is a stupid idea. And I put the message in there, right? And I realized that, yeah, that probably wasn't the most mature thing, but that's how I felt at the time. So variables can literally be whatever you want. So you're going to do that. You'll say set, and then give it a variable name, and then do a comma. And then after the comma, you're going to put whatever data you want to store in there. And I want you to keep in mind that you can store any type of data. So we can store text, numbers, we can store controls, we can scroll screens, we can store whole tables, we can store colors, like any of the different objects that you can work with inside of Power Apps, you can store inside of a variable. So we're going to go with simple here to begin with, and we're just going to start with some text. I'm going to put in double quotes and say, is a dog, close my double quotes, right? So that's just a text string, same way we put in a label. And if we close that, we've got set var buddy is a dog. So now if I press this button, so I'm going to hold on the Alt key and press button, boop. Now, if we were to insert ourselves a label on the screen, we could go here and say var buddy, and just like that, it says is a dog. We could have another button, let's just copy this one. So Control C, Control V. And so we could have another one here. It says is a cat, right? He's not in the room right now, so he's not gonna be offended. But if I press that button, boop, it overwrites var buddy with is a cat. And you can tell that because look, set variable into this value. So it's not saying set this variable to different values, don't increment them, don't add them together. It just says overwrite with whatever's in there with that value. If we wanted to have it overwrite, we could, right? Let's just copy the button again, copy, paste. And so here we can say set var buddy to, we can reference itself, var buddy, so whatever's in that text string, and space a fish. Close our string like that. So now this is going to take whatever is currently in var buddy and then append to that, right? Because the ampersand says concatenate a fish. So now if we press, let's hit play to kind of test this out. If we press this button, is a dog. We press this button, is a cat. Back to is a dog. When we press this one, it's going to add, is a dog a fish? I guess I should have said and a fish, but it doesn't matter, right? If we go back to this one, it's going to set that, right? That's the beauty of variables, is they just do whatever you tell them and they're not going to automatically change, right? This global variable will stay this no matter what. And the reason we call this a global variable is because if we create another screen, new screen, and we go here and we insert ourselves another label, and then here we can just say var buddy again. And there you go, right? It's currently a cat. If we go back over here and press the cat a fish, now it's over here, it says a cat a fish. This var buddy equals that value wherever you might be. Now, another way you might use a variable, right? Let's go back over here. Let's insert ourselves another button. And so let's say that this time what we want to do is we want to have a variable and we're just going to count every time you press the button. So you could say something like set var counter. And right, I could have said var cow, it doesn't matter. And then we just say var counter plus 1. So right now the variable doesn't exist. So think of that as 0. And here we'll just change our label here, insert ourselves a label. And so here we'll go and say var counter, right? There's nothing in there. But if I press the button, boop, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It is automatically updating. So you can use variables. And these are the type of things you might find yourself doing with variables. Maybe you need to track how many times they click the button. Maybe you need to track how many times they change the work order, right? You just never know what you want to be able to do and keep temporarily, right? I don't need to track that and save it to a data source. I just need it to make this session of the app work. That's what variables are for. Global variables being very nice because I can change them whenever I want, right? We just saw that. And we also can use them on any screen throughout our app. Now, one thing to be careful about though, is that you can't set variables to be different things, right? So if we were to go here, like, and we look at var buddy is a catfish, right here, it's a catfish, data type is text, okay? If I copy this button again, copy, paste, what if I was to go here and say var buddy and set it to 5? What's gonna happen? We're gonna break everything, right? Because now it's freaked out and it's gonna say, hey, incompatible types. Because when we said the original time, right, we said var buddy is a dog. We said, PowerApps said, oh, okay, Shay needs this to be a string or a text variable. It automatically did that. When we did this one, it said, oh, those are numbers. This will automatically be a number variable, right? If we click on it, right, 5 data type number. But now that we've done this, now we're trying to mix 5, which is a number, and text is a cat. That's not going to work. So that's why it's really mad at us, okay? So if you ever see that incompatible type, it's because you're trying to set it to 2 different data types in your app. If you need to store 2 different data types, just have 2 different variables and you'll be fine, right? So if we put double quotes around it, then that would be fine, right? Because that's no longer the number 5, that is the text 5, right? Which there is a difference. So global variables, if you don't know which ones to use global variables. You can almost never go wrong. The only reason that we try not to always use global variables, because that's kind of my preference, but it shouldn't be, is that they are very heavy, right? So PowerApps has to keep them in memory the entire time on all the different screens, no matter what you're doing, because it's always there with you because it's globally available. So it uses a lot of resources. So in large apps, we're really trying to drive performance. We don't want a variable like that, taking up memory across 25 different screens when I really only needed it on one screen. So to that end, if we go here, let's make another new screen. The second type of variable is what we call a context variable. Context variables are variables that only exist within the context that you created them. What does that mean? That means it's only on this screen, right? So if we insert ourselves a button and we're going to write the formula this way, it is called UpdateContext. Now pay attention because its syntax is one of the reasons I don't like it. It's a little goofy. So open our parenthesis, then you have to do a curly brace, and then you would say var cow, and then do a colon, and then we can say brown, close our curlies and close that. And so now we have a text variable called var cow, and it'll say brown, right? If we insert ourselves a label, and we then say, hey, show me var cow, like that. Oh, easy for me to do. If we press the variable, boop, there you go. It says brown there. From the standpoint of, if I had another one that said red and another one that said green, right? Like that would all work the same. We can append to them. That working with the data and the type of data that it stores is exactly the same as a global variable. The major difference is that it's only available in the context, the screen that it got created in. What does that mean? So if we go back here to screen 2, if I insert ourselves another label here and we go and we start trying to type in var cow, like notice it doesn't auto suggest it, right? Doesn't auto suggest it, but we just typed it in. It's got to work, right? Like we know it works. That exact same thing worked over here. No, because var cow context variables only exist on the screen that you created them on. If you have something where you only need to keep track of the number of times you're doing something on that one screen, then we could do it as a context variable. The most common thing that you're going to see these for is like with a pop-up, right? So say that we want to have a way to show like a big old smiley face pop-up, right? So if we go back over here, we'll just insert ourselves an icon. There you go, an emoji smile, right? Okay. So what if we want to have this thing show and hide like when the screen's loading, right? We do this with like loading spinners all the time. So we could insert ourselves a button here, and then we're going to go here and we're going to say, hey, I want this button to update context, right? Weird curly bracket stuff, yuck. Var show smile. And then we're going to set it to not var show smile. Close that, close that, close that. Okay, so what did I do? I just made var show smile a Boolean variable, right? Boolean variables are true or false, right? It's either on or off. And so what this says is, hey, set var show smile to be var show smile, but the not. So if it's true, make it false. If it's false, make it true. So it's going to just toggle it between those two for us. So now if we go here, we're going to say, hey, Mr. Smiley Face, love you and all, but I only want you to be visible when that's true. So we're going to say var show smile like so. Right now it's gone. But now if we hit play and we press the button, there's a smile, right? Because the variable was false, it set it to true. Right now the variable's true. So if we set it to true, or if we click it again, true, the opposite of true is false. So boom, it goes away. So boop, 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 right? So that's one of the most common ways that you will, one of the scenarios you're going to see that. Like if you have like a loading screen or please wait screen, that type of stuff where you want to have that functionality. The nice thing about doing it with context variables is that, okay, so this one works here, right? What happens if I take this button and this icon, copy, new screen, paste it over here? It pastes it over just fine. But what's nice about this, because each instance, even though we're using var show smile on both screens, which is probably a bad idea, but if we press it here, right? So right now var show smile is true, right? That's why we see the smiley face. This screen, we don't see the smiley face because it's currently false, right? But if we press it now it's true, press it again, it's false again, but we still haven't affected this one. So that's one of the neat things about context variables is that, they are screen specific. So you can, not have to overthink them. Other interesting thing about context variables is that you can set multiple at once, okay? So if I go right here, I'm gonna do a comma and we're gonna call this var my count, I don't know. And we're going to set that to be that whole var my count +1, right? So we're going to track how many times they press this button. And then if we insert ourselves a label, and we're going to say, hey, show me var my count, like so. So then now we press the button, boop, it's true, and it's 1. We press again, boop. Oh, there you go. I missed the button. I missed my boop. There you go. Press it twice. Now it's false and 2. True is 3. False is 4, right? And so the reason, because when we press that one button, that is setting both of those variables at the same time, right? It's updating both those variables. With the set function that we talked about over here, you can't say var buddy and then var chicken and then blue, right? Like it doesn't work the same way. It's like, what in the world are you doing? I have no idea what you even mean. So if I wanted to set two variables here, I would then need to close that semicolon and then I'd say set var chicken to blue, like so, right? And so then that would let me set two variables with one button press, right? But see how that's different? We have two different sets there versus if we go back over here, we were able to just put it all inside of one update context. So a little bit weird, a little bit different, but that's how it works. Hey, are you enjoying this practical deep dive, like explaining things in words that make sense? Right? Like that's totally my style. So if you'd love to take a training class with me, right? I've got live classes and on-demand classes. I've even got a 6-month live university program, right? Go to training.poweraapps911.com. Love to work with you to help you learn, whether it's the on-demand or the live stuff, and help you be more educated with more practical knowledge and dumb jokes like me trying to get phone numbers of cheerleaders. All right, let's make it a new screen again. So the next type, the third type of variable is what we call a table variable, right? So both context variables and global variables were really just about one little piece of information on my hand real quick. Technically, they can both hold tables, but we're not going to talk about that. That's a little weird to me. But what if I do want to have a table, right? I want to pull in a table. Maybe I want to be able to, pull in multiple rows and columns of information. I want to be able to edit, right? So think about the time I got the name of the phone numbers of all the cheerleaders, right? Like I had, Susie and her number, and Becca and her number, and Damia and her number, and Lindsay and her phone number, right? Like I had all this information. I wrote it on my arm, right? We had rows and columns of information. Now the phone numbers they gave me were things like 12, so I don't feel like those were real phone numbers, but alas, what do you do? But when you want to have rows and columns of information, then what you're going to do is you're going to use this another type of variable called a collection. Okay, so let's insert another button. So there's two different ways to create a collection. One is to use the function collect. Collect col numbers. Okay, so that's when it says, hey, if there's a collection that doesn't exist, you can create one called col numbers, and then we're going to put some data in it. If the collection does exist, then append to it. So if we said col numbers, and then you're going to have to put records in there, right? Whole rows of information. So it would be something like this, right? Name equals Susie. And then we do a comma, and then we'd say number, we'll call it num, we'll call it PN for phone number. And what did we say? It was 12, right? That's very rude of Susie. Oh, that's not where a comma goes. It's a colon. And then we close our curly, and we close that. And so we'd write a formula like that, right? So collect col numbers, name, Susie, PN 12. Good, 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 right? So now what happens, and we're going to, right, we want to show that. So we're going to put a gallery on the screen, and we're going to show col numbers. And we're going to say, hey, in col numbers here, I want name. And then in this field, we want to see PN for phone number. Okay. So now if I press the button, boop, now there's one Susie 12, right? The second time I'm going to press the button, it's going to say, oh, that collection doesn't exist. Let me add a row. Boop, there's Susie 12 again. Boop, 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 right? So with collections, the idea is we can store entire tables of information. And by using collect, that says, hey, if it exists, add to it. If it doesn't exist, create it, and then put that row in there. The other function with collections is called ClearCollect. So if you put a clear in front of that, like so, now what happens when I press that button, boop, it says, hey, if there's anything in col numbers, wipe it out, and then add or show what I put here. If it doesn't exist, then create it. So every time I press this button, it's just going to keep putting Susie back in there because ClearCollect is saying, hey, we just get one. Now, if you're thinking, Shane, it's really weird. Why would I want to have a button that does this? So typically what we're going to do is we're going to use this in more advanced scenarios. So imagine instead of having name being Susie and PN being 12, we were using text input. So that way we could collect multiple pieces of information into that table. Or, we were going to, have some type of experience. Maybe we pulled in a whole table and we put that in gallery and we made that all editable, right? Like those are all two advanced concepts of what we want to do here. What I need you to take away from this is that they are tables. Now, if you're thinking, but I do want to go deeper in collections, cool. I got a video up there. This is one of my more popular videos where it walks through all the nitty gritty details of collection. We're not going to do that today, but I wanted you to at least understand that they were table variables. Because the other thing that we're going to often see here, so this is I'm collecting or working with information directly in my app. What if you have like a data source that you want to cache? So if I go over here to my data sources and let's just add a SharePoint data source real quick. And I'm just going to edit all this out so you don't need to see me adding a SharePoint data source. I'm just going to add a SharePoint data source. There you go. I added 2 departments and employees. And so here what I could do is I could just insert ourselves another button. And if I want to cache that data, I would say something like this. I'd say ClearCollect col departments and then that departments. And so boop. Now what happens is I make one call out to my data source, whether it's SharePoint, SQL, Dataverse, doesn't matter. And I pulled in that whole table up to the delegation limit. And then that is now cached. So if we inserted ourselves another gallery and said, hey, use col department, look, there is all the information from my departments list. But the difference is that this data is all coming out of col department. It's all cached. So if you ever have a scenario where you want to pull in a table that you're just going to reference, so like I want to be able to quickly look up against it or things like that, collections are great for that as well. And thinking about that scenario, one of the most common places you might do that, right? So if I was going to want this to be cached just once, right? I just need it cached once, but when I pull the app open, one way you might do that, Control Copy, go over here and go to App, and then there is what we call on start. And so then you could put it there. So now when the app first starts, it is going to load that data into that collection. One of the things that's important to understand is that by putting it on start, it's no different than being in a button. So same type of thing. Like if I wanted it always to start out with var buddy is a dog, right? I could copy that, go over here to app, and we're going to put a semicolon here, paste that in. So now when my app starts, the default value for var buddy will be is a dog, and the collection will be cold apartment will be populated with whatever's from SharePoint. Keeping in mind that all of this, anything you have it on start has to run before your app renders for your user. So if it took a long time, you're doing a bunch here, it might make your app start really slow for your users. So be cognizant of that. But the reason I want you to see on start, because this is where a lot of us put things. Now, in the case of var buddy as a dog, we wanted to be able to change that all over the place. The challenge though, right? Because I want to be able to change it from, is a dog to is a catfish, right? And if I want to run this right now while I'm in the context, we can click on the ellipses here and say run on start. And so that'll make it fire. So it's back to as a dog. var buddy, I want to change all the time. This collection, I just want to use once as is. I don't need to change it. So that brings us to our fourth type of variable, and that is called a named formula. So the same place that onStart is, if you hit the drop down here, you have formulas. In formulas, this is another place that you can declare a variable that will exist in your app, right? So if we said var sport, right? And I keep using absurd names because I want you to understand that you can use weird names, right? Let's say var sport equals soccer, right? My kids love soccer. And put a semicolon after that. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to call it var though. Instead of using var, I'm going to put an NF in front of this because we call these named formulas. So this is a special type of variable. This is one that I'm like, PowerApps, take the wheel. I am giving up all control. By putting it here, PowerApps is going to always decide when does this variable need to be calculated and used. Why is that relevant? Because unlike onStart, if it doesn't need this on the first screen, then it's not going to automatically run it. So my users aren't going to have to wait on this to run. But now if we go anywhere in the app, right, we go here to screen 5, insert ourselves a label. Now we have NF Sport and it says soccer. Very cool. So Shane, why wouldn't I always use those? Those sound better. They are, but they're not. Okay. So remember our var buddy, right? Where we want to change it from dog to cat to is a cat a fish. I don't even know what that says. I wish I'd written something smarter, but I didn't. Get over it. One of the things to understand about named formulas, the most important thing to understand is that you cannot change these anywhere in the app. I cannot copy this code, go insert myself another button on the screen. Let's just do it screen's getting too busy. Insert ourselves a new button here. Like if I try and put that same code here, it's like, I don't even know what you mean, right? Like if we change this and we put like football and then we press this button, like, let's just insert a label. What's it going to say? It's going to say NF Sport Soccer. Why? Because this is saying, does NF Sport equal football, right? And the answer to that question is false. This is just doing a comparison. So that wouldn't work. Well, what if we try to do set NF Sport to football? That's not going to work because it's going to tell you unexpected characters, right? Like, it's basically saying, I don't know what in the world you're doing again, Shane, because you crazy. You cannot change name formulas. So I get this question all the time, like, why would I use name formulas instead of global variables? And it's that reason right there, right? Do I need to be able to change this thing throughout my app? If the answer is yes, then it needs to be a global variable. If the answer is no, then absolutely you can come back over here. Oh, I got to fix this one. Let's just delete this, right? That all works. So up here, NF Soccer works great. One of the things you probably want to do was be like NF departments, and then you set that to equal to your departments, right? That would be a good use because remember, what did we say? In our app, when we did this on start, I'm like, hey, I'm just doing this here to cache this once. I'm never going to change it. I'm never going to mess with it. Then it doesn't belong here, right? Delete. I should be using that exclusively on the formulas here. And so then NF departments is what I'd want to use, right? So that's the big difference. Like people really struggle with that. Named formulas only, you don't get to control them at all. Global variables, context variables, you absolutely do control them. Another little nugget I missed along the way, on start, if you are putting things here, you can only use global variables. You cannot use context variables, right? Update context, it's just going to yell at me. Var chicken equals good. It's like, no, you can't use that because On start, right? Like what is the context of on start? It's not tied to a screen. So context variables don't work there. If you need to set something to use on start, the edit, it's always going to be a set. And I will mention that there's a video up there if you're thinking, hey, I would like to learn more about those name formulas because they're pretty new. There is a whole video dedicated to those that will go a little bit deeper in them, but hopefully it's kind of answered the questions of when and where, right? And the exposure that they exist. Okay, so the last one here, this one is another one that drives a lot of confusion, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to insert ourselves a label. And so sometimes what you need to do is you want to do some type of temporary variable, but like you don't want to make like a global variable. You don't want to make a context variable. You just need something that is repetitive in a single chunk of code. So a lot of times we see this on like complex patch statements or, complex renderings, like we're trying to do a bunch of things. And so here, what we're going to do is we're going to use what is called with. So let's take and write ourselves a formula real quick. Something like this. Shane is part of and then we did a lookup for employees, right? So this is go and look in the employees list, find the record for the first name equals Shane and return the department. So Shane is part of the executive department and his title is, and we're doing the same exact lookup employees first name Shane, but this time we're returning the title and then a period at the end, right? And his title is PowerApps Guru. This is a type of repetitiveness, I don't know how you say that word, that I see that this is inefficient, right? We're making the same network call twice in this context, but we only need this information to make this one label work. So what you're going to do is you're going to use something called with. You're going to go here and you're going to say with, put those weird curly brackets around it, and we're going to call this X record. And then we're going to put that lookup in here, right? So we're going to grab just the lookup, not the dot, control copy, paste, close our curly, do a comma, and then go to the end here. So what this is going to do is it's going to create think of it as a variable. It's not, I guess it is a variable. I don't know. Like if it's a variable, it's not like it's debatable, but it doesn't matter. Basically, we're going to have something, we're going to call it a variable, that exists called X record, but it only exists between that parenthesis there and that parenthesis there. And it's going to do a lookup of that information. So now in here where we have these redundant calls, we're going to change this and we're going to say, hey, you should just be X record. Notice that we get the same thing there. All right, we're going to go to this one, delete it out, and also change it to be X record. So now our formula is smaller, but more importantly, it is more efficient, right? So if you ever look at a large code block, you're like, hey, I am doing the same lookup, same calculation, same concatenation. I'm doing the same thing multiple times, more than once in that block, then you can put a with around that. And the with function just basically says, hey, X record just exists between that parenthesis and that one, right? If we go over here and change this to be X record, it doesn't exist, right? Like I'm trying, it's not auto-suggesting anything. It doesn't exist. It only exists here. This is the ultimate inefficiency, right? Because it only lives in one little world, but it makes that better. I had a customer that came to me many years ago. He had written this big report for his trucking data, right? Like it was all the drivers and what they'd done and what they'd earned for the week. It was massive. He wrote it, it worked, but basically what he did was he clicked on the screen and he went away, right? Because it took 12, I don't know how you do 12, right? 12 minutes to render. He's like, hey, can you help me? So I spent a lot of hours staring at his 8 million thousand lines of code. It was all HTML because he's showing it an HTML block. He wanted to make a PDF of it after the fact. Basically, I went through it and I added a whole bunch of this with. I did some add columns. I did a bunch of like just redundancy removing. And I got it from 12 minutes down to 30 seconds to render. So you can always make your code better when you have redundancy. And the first piece of that is with. And I just think it's so much, it's like a variable, but it's not, that I think it's important to understand this context. Remember, you can't use it anywhere else. You can't set it. All of my withs throughout my app could have the same X record. It doesn't matter because each one only lives in its own little bubble. Those are another way to, sometimes make your app more efficient without carrying a variable around across the whole global app when you really just needed it right here. Now, there is a video for that one as well. I'll put it up there. So much to learn here, but hopefully the idea of this video, we're done, I'll stop talking, is that we have figured out that there's a lot of different ways to kind of do relatively the same thing, but each one kind of has its individual purpose. And so now that you understand what each one's purpose is, maybe we can do some cooler, more interesting things and make our apps a little bit faster, a little more performant. If nothing else, we learned something. Questions, comments, ideas, leave them below. This is one of those topics that I literally have hundreds of thousands of views on variables. So I kind of just remake this video every few years to kind of get you updated with the latest. So next time I make this again in 2 years, what should I be telling them? You can tell me now. All right. And with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.